Welcome to Mortis Terrors.
Welcome, my fellow fear enthusiasts. Tonight, I have another terrifying tale for you. The first time I heard my own voice coming through the radio, I was standing in a room where nobody had lived for 19 years. The voice said my name. Then it whispered, "Don't answer me." I remember laughing when I heard it, not because it was funny, because sometimes fear arrives so suddenly that the mind grabs the nearest emotion it can find. The radio sat on a folding table in the corner of the abandoned communications station, covered in dust and cobwebs. Its power cord wasn't even plugged in. I had been inside the station for less than an hour. My name is Daniel Mercer, and at the time, I worked as an electrical contractor doing inspection and salvage work for old municipal buildings. The communications station sat several miles outside a small mountain town, surrounded by pine forest and an access road that had nearly disappeared beneath weeds and loose gravel. The county planned to demolish the building. My job was simple: check the electrical system, photograph anything worth salvaging, make sure there were no hazards before the demolition crew arrived. I had been inside dozens of abandoned buildings. Most were boring. This one wasn't. The first thing that bothered me was the temperature. Outside, it was almost 70 degrees. Inside, the station felt like winter. The air had that damp, metallic smell that old buildings sometimes develop, mixed with something faintly electrical. I found the main breaker panel near the entrance. Every breaker was switched off. I checked them twice. There was no power entering the building. Still, somewhere deeper inside, I heard a faint buzzing sound. It reminded me of an old fluorescent light trying to start. I followed it down a narrow hallway. At the end was a communications room filled with outdated equipment. Shelves covered the walls, coiled cables hung from hooks. Several old radio consoles sat beneath cracked windows. The buzzing came from the corner. That's where I found the radio. It was an old military-style receiver with a black metal casing and a frequency dial marked in faded white numbers. I recognized the model. My father had owned one almost identical to it. That detail bothered me more than it should have. I stepped closer. The radio suddenly clicked. A burst of static filled the room. I froze. The display remained dark. Then I heard a man's voice. "Daniel." I stared at the speaker. The voice sounded distant, distorted by static, but there was something unmistakable about it. It was mine. "Daniel." I stepped backward. The radio crackled. Then my voice whispered something so quietly that I almost missed it. "Don't answer me." The transmission stopped. I stood there for several seconds. Then I laughed. I told myself somebody had installed a recording device. Maybe the demolition company had been playing a prank. Maybe an old battery was somehow powering the receiver. I reached for the dial. Before my fingers touched it, the radio spoke again. "It's already listening." I pulled my hand away. The room went silent. I left the station shortly afterward. At least, I tried to. When I reached the front entrance, the door wouldn't open. I pulled harder. Nothing. The old metal handle turned freely, but the door stayed shut. I checked the deadbolt. Unlocked. I checked the hinges. Nothing was holding it. Then I heard 3 knocks from the communications room. Slow. Heavy. Knock. 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 I didn't go back. I grabbed my phone and called the county office. No signal. I walked to a window. Nothing. The forest outside looked perfectly normal. That's when I noticed something strange. The clock above the doorway had stopped at 2:17. I checked my phone. 2:17. I waited. A minute passed. The phone still said 2:17. I restarted it. 2:17. The second hand on my wristwatch had stopped too. I remember feeling a pressure in my ears. Then the radio came alive. Static. A long hiss. And my voice. "Daniel, you're going to hear knocking." I stared at the speaker. "I know you're scared." My stomach tightened. "I know you're standing by the door." I wasn't moving. "Don't turn around." Something breathed behind me. I felt the air move against the back of my neck. I turned. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The radio continued. "When the door opens, don't leave." I whispered. "Who is this?" The radio went silent. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then another voice came through. A man's voice. Older, weak, almost buried beneath static. "Thank you." I knew that voice. My father had been dead for 11 years. I hadn't heard his voice in 11 years, but I knew it. I knew the slight roughness in his throat. I knew the way he dragged certain words. I knew the pause he always made before saying my name. "Danny." My knees nearly gave out. The radio clicked. "Danny, don't come looking for me." I couldn't breathe. My father had disappeared for 3 days before he died. That was something I had never told many people. He had gone missing during a winter storm while working on a remote communications tower. His truck was found 2 days later. His body was discovered the following morning. The official explanation was exposure. I had always accepted it until that moment, because the radio suddenly transmitted a date from 11 years earlier. Then a time, 2:17. I looked at the clock. The hands began moving. Backward. The minute hand spun slowly counterclockwise. The radio hissed. My father's voice whispered, "He's using my voice now." Something slammed against the entrance door. I jumped. Another impact. Then another. The handle began turning. I backed into the communications room. The radio continued transmitting. "Daniel, listen carefully." My father's voice sounded terrified. I had never heard my father sound terrified. "Whatever you hear outside this room, don't open the door." The entrance door suddenly flew open. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, wet, heavy. I couldn't see whoever was walking toward me. The hallway lights remained dead, but I could hear the footsteps approaching. 1, 2, 3. Then they stopped. Right outside the communications room, the radio whispered, "Don't look." I looked. There was nobody there, but something was standing in the doorway. I couldn't see a body. I couldn't see a face. I could only see the darkness where a person should have been. Then my own voice came from that darkness. "Daniel." I covered my mouth. The voice laughed softly. Then it said something that made my blood turn cold. "I'm glad you came back." I had never been to the station before. At least, that's what I believed. I looked toward the shelves. Something caught my eye. A stack of old maintenance photographs sat beneath a layer of dust. I pulled them out. The first view showed the communications station decades earlier. Then I found one dated 11 years ago. My father was standing beside the radio. I recognized his jacket. I recognized the truck behind him. And standing beside him was me. Except I was 17 years younger. Same face, same clothes, same scar above my eyebrow. I dropped the photograph. My father had never taken me to that station. I was certain. I picked it up again. On the back, someone had written a message. "Transmission received at 2:17. Another photograph showed the same room. My father stood beside the radio. This time, he was alone. Written on the back were 6 words. Daniel answered. Daniel came through. I heard the footsteps again. This time they were behind me. I turned. The darkness in the doorway was gone. The radio crackled. My father's voice came through one last time. "Now you understand," I whispered. "Understand what?" "Static." Then, I wasn't found in the woods. The radio went silent. A new voice answered. "Mine. I was found here." The room seemed to shrink around me. I looked at the radio. The frequency dial had moved by itself. It stopped on 91.7. I don't know why that number mattered. I only knew that the moment I saw it, I remembered something I hadn't remembered in years. A childhood memory. My father sitting beside me at our kitchen table. A radio between us. His finger turning a frequency dial. And my younger voice asking him what the strange sound was. He had told me it was static. He had lied. The station door suddenly opened. Real daylight poured into the hallway. I ran. I don't remember crossing the parking lot. I don't remember starting my truck. I remember driving until the forest disappeared behind me. When I finally stopped, my phone said 5:42 p.m. Nearly 3 hours had passed. I called the county office. The supervisor told me something that still keeps me awake. The communications station had been demolished in 2007. not scheduled for demolition, already demolished. The county records showed nothing about my inspection. There was no building, no radio, no communications room, nothing. I drove back the next morning. The access road ended at a locked gate. Beyond it was an empty clearing covered in weeds. I stood there for a long time. Then I noticed something near the edge of the clearing. A piece of black metal. I picked it up. It was part of an old radio casing. On the inside, scratched into the metal, were 2 words. My name, Daniel. Underneath it was a frequency, 91.7. I threw the metal into the weeds. I never went back. But that isn't the worst part. The worst part happened 3 nights later. I woke up at 2:17 in the morning. My bedroom was completely dark. My phone was on the nightstand. No notifications. No calls. Then I heard static, very faint, coming from my closet. I didn't move. The static grew louder. Then a voice whispered from behind the closed door. My voice. Daniel. I held my breath. The voice whispered again. Don't answer me. I stayed silent. Then came 3 slow knocks from inside the closet. Knock, knock, knock. I haven't opened that door. Not once, but every few nights, at exactly 2:17, the static returns. And sometimes I hear my father's voice. Sometimes I hear mine. But last night, for the first time, I heard something different. A voice I didn't recognize. It whispered a number, 91.7. Then it said, your turn. I still don't know what that means. I don't know whether the station ever existed the way I remember it. I don't know whether the radio was transmitting something from the past, something from the future, or something that has never happened at all. But I know one thing. Every time the static starts, I can hear someone breathing on the other side of my closet door. And lately, the breathing has been getting closer to the microphone, as if whatever is on the other side isn't trying to reach me anymore, as if it's waiting for me to start transmitting. Your story ends here. The nightmare doesn't. If you want more terrifying tales, like, comment, and subscribe. The lights will go out, the silence will return, and when it does, listen carefully. Another story is about to begin.